Welcome to Awaken the Mind, the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, hosted by David Uhas.
You're listening to Awaken the Mind, the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, a podcast that inspires the curious to the professional to discover meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name is David Uhas, and I'm a master NLP practitioner and hypnotist, best known for losing over 100 pounds and running 6 marathons in 2 years. And I'm sitting down with hypnotists, NLP practitioners, and coaches to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact in the lives of others.
Our guest today is Jason Linett. How can a hypnotist help you grow your business? Jason Linett has used the principles of rapport and modeling to track what top business performers do differently to build his own $1 million brand. His book, Work Smart Business, rapidly became an Amazon bestseller, and Jason speaks to groups around the world, sharing how to turn your goals into a profitable reality. Rather than just hypnotize you to become more successful, he will help you de-hypnotize the personal blocks that may be holding back your business success. Jason's process isn't magic. The results can be magical. And please give a warm welcome to our guest today, Mr. Jason Linett. Hello, Jason.
Hey, David. Good to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for getting up bright and early today.
This is sleeping in for me, usually. We are recording, for those that haven't picked it up. It's 6 a.m. for me, 5 a.m. for you. When the morning.
Woohoo! Cool. Well, I'm really excited just that you are here today, as well as that our guests are going to get to learn a lot about you. Can you tell me about your growing up, the schools, your role models, your hobbies and interests?
Yeah. So I've come to learn a favorite phrase around this, which was that as a kid, as a teenager, kind of growing up in a family where everyone actually was an entrepreneur. So the idea of eventually growing up and starting my own thing and launching my own business really wasn't too out of the ordinary. As a completely random reference point, there's the actor, comedian who's on Saturday Night Live, Jason Sudeikis. And there's a great interview with him somewhere where someone's going, "What did your parents think of you growing up and becoming an actor?" And he goes, "Oh, you didn't do your research," because his uncle was George Wendt from Cheers. And it was that funny moment of going, "Oh yeah, it wasn't a weird idea. He didn't really help me, but it was accepted." So having parents that broke away from their own, jobs to eventually become leading wedding photographers in the country. And I had a hobby as a kid of doing magic tricks because it beats being popular. So having the experience of really going off and learning things that were rather unique and kind of getting to a place where it was never really the concern of being the one stepping up onto a stage and doing a presentation. I can think back to a time that I was about maybe 12 years old in a big theater in Norfolk, Virginia. I was originally from Virginia Beach, with about 800 or 900 people in the audience, and just not being fazed by that. Just here's something that I want to share with people. And that journey with magic is kind of what led into the hypnosis, because when eventually I discovered hypnosis, I was kind of at a frustration point with the magic, because if I could really do magic tricks, why would I have to carry on a pack of playing cards? If I could really make money appear at my fingertips, why would it have to be 1890s Morgan silver dollars? Instead, what was something that didn't have any props, didn't have any trick to it? And that's what eventually led into the work that I do nowadays.
Nice. And that was actually my next question. What brought you to where you are today with hypnosis?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, even to rewind a little bit back too, I followed a career path for a number of years working in professional theater. So I wasn't necessarily the actor or the designer. I was the one behind the curtains, calling cues as the stage manager, organizing scene changes, and dealing with contracts, unions, and rather difficult personalities at times, which let's call that the psychological training base. So, that sort of background getting into it, I was in college and someone came to my school and did one of those stage hypnosis shows. And I can share this with your audience because they're a little bit more familiar with hypnosis than a lot of the business groups I've been speaking to. There's a challenge sometimes with stage hypnosis, which is where they get someone up and they do the entertaining program. They bring up volunteers from the crowd and hilarity ensues. If you don't know the people who are up there as volunteers, it's easy to fall prey to the idea that, oh, this is fake. This is all set up. Those are all people that are actors. Well, the first program I ever saw, he had pulled up most of my friends who were fellow theater majors in college. and they were actors. Now, this became a weird split reality because most of the audience is now kind of losing faith in the program because they're going, these are all actors. This is fake. And I'm watching, and to their credit, these are my friends. To their discredit, I didn't think they were that great of actors. And for the first time ever, they're absolutely genuine on stage. And I'm there going, this stuff is real. I got to learn this. So it became that journey of really learning as much as I could, from picking up books and the early days of getting the VHS cassette tape course in the mail, and just kind of tracking everything that I could. And just, it slowly became that hobby that took over.
Nice. I really enjoyed reading your book, and
Thank you.
I know that you're a well-read person. I could tell you brought up several different books. Of course, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, E-Myth Revisited, 4-Hour Workweek, Fascinate, Outliers, Book Yourself Solid. I met him, by the way. And
nice.
tell me about your all-time favorite book, if there is an all-time favorite book, or just something that really made a huge impact in your life.
Yeah, because the name of the book is actually a quote from Steve Martin. Here we go. The book is So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And sorry, Cal, who I hope is listening because he's a good guy. But to look at, again, it's a Steve Martin quote. The reason that I enjoy it so much, and it's probably a book that I've gifted many times over in the years, what I really find fascinating about the book is, first of all, it goes to the ultimate business model. Which is a Steve Martin quote, just be so good they can't ignore you. You know, this is where every bit of marketing skill, every bit of clever strategy for driving traffic to a website is going to fall short, because if you're just so good they can't ignore you and you're doing the work to get the message out there, you're going to have a business forever. What I find really fascinating about the book is a quote that actually comes from someone in the hypnosis community, Scott Sandlin, the mindset of learn from people who disagree with each other. That what I found fascinating about going through this book is I absolutely agree with the premise. And the premise of the book is that, you know, yes, there needs to be passion to get the business up and running, yet it's the skills, it's the 10,000 plus hours of actually putting in the effort to become world class at it that really makes you stand apart. That the idea itself is not enough, yet it's the actual application of getting really, really good at this stuff. And I find myself agreeing and violently disagreeing with that theme at times, because the passion has to be there to keep going at it. Otherwise, there's no interest and drive to get better and better at something. So there has to be this balance. So I've shared it several times over the years with the advice of going, read this. Here's what I agree with. Here's what I disagree with. Yet still, I definitely support the message the book is putting out there. But again, it's where, you know, getting into that just theme of, just be so good they can't ignore you.
Nice. And of course, all of those books are excellent books. And one of the things, you know, when I first met you was actually through my training with the Dave Ellman Institute.
Yeah.
And you were a special guest, and our class got to meet you. And I've just always been inspired by you, that every time you talk, I learn something. There's something that I can apply in my business. So often, you know, you hear stuff and it feels like a commercial, it feels like a, you know, sales thing, but with you, you're always bringing value. And in your book, you talk about, you've got these principles, several of them. One of them, be the expert, not the vendor. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, this goes back to that original point you just mentioned there too, because there's a simple formula, which, not to let it be a negative or an away from strategy, but the first time I was at a professional convention listening to somebody talk about how do you actually get more business, I asked a simple follow-up question because I was curious about how do you modify that idea for a different market. And the person teaching that workshop simply responded, oh, I've never actually done this technique myself. I just learned it online and I thought it would be cool to share, which meant shouldn't have been teaching it. So instead, it's where over the years becoming the bit of the guinea pig, that my principle is always, I won't teach things that I haven't personally done myself. So it's easy to share something that is going to be actionable and actually is going to get results because it actually did for me, as opposed to just being theory or armchair philosophy. Yeah, the mindset of be the expert, not the vendor. Let's take this to the example of, I know you've got coaches in your audience, you've got other hypnotists in your audience and other people in wellness professions. Think about the standard sort of vendor show, the health fair, which you could be the person at the convention, at the vendor room with the table, just with the free items to take away, and that's the end of the dialogue. And yes, I embrace the irony as somebody who one time bought 800 purple fidget spinners to give away at a convention. So, which if you need a source, I got one. So you could be that person just with that free thing. Yet something is different when you're the one who is there providing value, when you're actually sharing something, when you're actually teaching something. So something completely different happens when you're the one who is now presenting and sharing. Let's take the example of something that I did to build out a segment of my business, which I've now kind of outsourced to other people. What really built my business was that I was doing a motivational program for high schools. And something that I did, and I tell the story in the Work Smart Business book, something that I did was I found the opportunity to write for a magazine that principals read. And just by way of a simple contact, calling up, and a little bit of suggestive language in this, hey, here are 2 issues I've been running into with schools. And there's this issue number 1, this issue number 2. Which of those 2 do you think your principals would find the most value in reading an article about? And they go, oh, absolutely, the second one. It's like, okay, great. Where do I send a draft of an article? And it was a bit of an implied close, to use some sales lingo here. Yet it was a thing that, let's pause the story here. It was a thing that it wasn't not manufactured authority. I had already worked a couple of hundred schools at this point in my career, but I was using that as the leverage point to now go in and talk about the thing that I saw there was a need for. So the article printed, and the phone rang a couple of times from principals seeing my article and reaching out to find out more about me. It's more so what I did with it. This is where the greatest business lesson I ever learned came from watching The Simpsons, because there was Troy McClure, the character that Phil Hartman voiced of, hi, I'm Troy McClure, you may remember me from. And I sent out color copies of this article to about 1,000 principals across the East Coast of the States, and just saying, hey, I'm sure you might have seen my article. Here's an extra copy for your records. Briefly, here's what I do. So in a very non-salesy, non-confrontational way, which suddenly now I wasn't just the guy trying to sell them a program, which, yeah, I was, but I was also now somebody who could speak their language and understood what their needs were. So within any business strategy that you're looking at, ask yourself, is this going to position me only as the vendor or as somebody who is really an expert at what I do? So for a while, I was running a local advertisement in a magazine, a local newspaper, but I only did that because I was also writing for the newspaper. So look for that place to demonstrate value rather than just ask for the sale.
Our audience, there are a lot of new hypnotists, new NLP practitioners, new coaches. And what I've heard, a lot of people have some concerns when they first start out. So what are some common challenges that new hypnotists, new practitioners run into?
The most common challenge I often find is that they're looking at it as being something a lot more difficult than it needs to be. They're holding on to some sort of negative expectation or negative issue. Hello, that's got orange there real quick. I looked at it, I'm awfully green. Let's make me red. There we are. That's better coloring. For those listening to the audio only, enjoy as I color correct my video. The issue that often pops up is that it's something that I've now kind of branded as the power of premise, that surprisingly, as much as we're in a helping profession, you hear a lot of negative dialogue out there that it's going to be slow your first year. People won't come to see somebody who's new in business. Maybe you should take it a little bit more easily. And there's something to be said about jumping in with both feet and going, I'm going to make this work. Now, the strategy that I did may not be a fit for everybody out there, because one of the things that I did in launching my business was that I signed a scary 2-year lease under the theme that I'm going to make this work, rather than, again, dipping the toes in the water going, maybe I'll swim today, maybe I won't. But we can modify that same idea in any aspect of going, again, rather than I'm going to write one article for this local paper, hey, let's do this for 6 months and see how it goes. Future pace that it's going to be an ongoing relationship as you do that. So the surprising thing is, again, that negative commentary that may be out there. And the real message inside of this is that the most inspiring word or the most dangerous word in your language could be the word because. That, because I've got kids, I've got to do this. Because I've got this situation with my other job, I've got to do that. You can use every bit of that as the springboard, as the catalyst to go, I'm going to make this happen.
Jason, of course, not only is a master hypnotist, but also a trainer in NLP. So he has an extensive background in NLP. And as I listen to you talk, I always pick up to that. And I love that. part about.
You mind if there's a quick story around that too that I'd love to share here, that there's a moment, and we are now chatting a couple of hours before I jump into an NLP training that I'm doing this weekend, or today's day 4. So there's a story years ago that I had a friend in the local area. He's now since moved. He used to train NLP courses around the Northern Virginia area. And I had referred a friend of mine to go take his class, and I'll change the name for obvious reasons. And I'm then checking in with Susan. Hey, how did you like the class? And the segment of NLP that she had attended, it was like a one-day sort of taster event. And it was all around more effective language patterns and rapport principles. How do we build better relationships was basically what the class was about. Now, Susan, changing her name, was involved with multi-level marketing, and she was actually involved with a company that I feel does really good products, really takes care of their people, doesn't just, the stereotype doesn't just take advantage of buy the big startup package and people fizzle out. This was a good one. And I bring that up because she was explaining that, well, I found it fascinating, but I just haven't had time to practice it. And that phrase really struck me as odd because the class was all based on just effective communication. She's involved with sales. She is speaking to people constantly. And to hear the phrase that I just haven't had time to practice it. And something clicked in that moment for me to go, if all of this hypnotic language stuff is based on effective communication, why does it have to be a thing we turn on and turn off? Instead, if this is all based in more effective communication models, talk like this all the time. Use it at all moments, become much more influential, much more purposeful with our language, much more to the point of, simply put, talking about what we want rather than what we don't want. So as you come across different methods for better communication, don't put them up on that pedestal that, oh, here's the thing I have to practice and eventually choose when it's time to use it. Use it all the time.
Absolutely. I was trained in NLP before hypnosis, and
Nice.
One of our leaders, she said, it becomes just part of who you are. And I find that, that's interesting about the sales. Lots of opportunity to just use it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about how important is it to success to build rituals? You talk about this in the book, not only in your business, but your personal lifestyle.
It kind of goes back to the other point that I share in Work Smart Business around designing systems. So, for example, just in the business side of things, there's a bit of a 10-day promotion that I've currently got running, which is really a model of something that I did several months ago, which is a model of something I did several years ago. All I had to do was change out the content, change out the offer, and the emails, the Facebook marketing is all taken care of. So the idea of building rituals kind of brings it to the personal life, that the real lesson became that in life that there's no such thing as finding the time, there's only making the time. So to make the time for you and I to connect this morning, the same way that I've made the time over the years for getting up about the same time each day and hitting the gym, making the time to better care for myself in terms of, having healthy foods around, making the time for being there with my kids as it's a school event, as it was a couple of nights ago. And that time was just as sacred as the important business meeting. So to look at going beyond habit, going beyond, behaviors, and instead lock these things in as rituals, so that there's certain times of my week that's dedicated to when I'm writing for a new project. That's when it's time dedicated to producing video for ongoing training materials. There's certain time that's dedicated to punching up the presentation that I do for business groups. And again, as you lock these in as rituals, yes, it's a bit of a reframe of language that, we can talk about habits and behaviors, but rituals, like the person who is without fail always at a church on a Sunday morning, the person who designs their schedule around being there when their kids are getting on and off the school bus. These have become rituals. So just a little bit of a shift of how we look at our behaviors becomes a much more efficient route to really lock those things in as that automatic response.
Tell me about your favorite roller coaster.
Oh, that's random, which is a story in the book. I have a soft spot for one. It's one that I haven't been on in years. In college, I worked for 2 summers at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. And I was there actually doing a magic show, which both times I was in parts. If you don't know that park, it's different. There's like 5 different areas, I believe, of the park that are themed around different, regions of Europe. So here's the old country, here's the Italy area, here's the Germany area. And both times in the magic shows that I did there, they had asked me to one, do a British dialect, and then the second year do a Irish dialect. And both times they politely a month in asked me to stop bothering because that's just not my skill. Uh, and there became this trend that there's certain things when you're working at a theme park that you're not supposed to do. Like a lot of them have the sky ride where you can take the little shuttle cart across the park, and they tell you when you work here, don't take the sky ride because it shuts down, it breaks every day. Have fun next time you're there. Took it every day because it was a faster way to get throughout the park. They also told you, you can feel free to ride rides over breaks, but don't ride the roller coasters because, again, they sometimes shut down, which is great advice to tell everybody. But there was one at Busch Gardens, which was Alpengeist, which I forget if they still have that one. It's one of those hanging roller coasters where you go upside down. The twists are all very smooth as opposed to ones that kind of jerk you around and give you a headache. And there were some mornings where the thought was either I can have my coffee or I can ride that roller coaster. So it's kind of a fond memory of, again, we can wake up in different ways. We can sort of get into that peak performance mode and with different resources, as it were.
When I first listened to you at the Elman training, I've had a lot of training, but it wasn't until that particular training that I loved the Elman Institute, Larry and Sharon. So plug for them, of course. But I came back on fire. I mean, I got an office and I started things. But one particular thing that you mentioned that really got me excited was you talked about the 4-hour work week and outsourcing. And I'd always thought about doing that, but I just couldn't come up with outsourcing. How can I bring this in to where, as opposed to hiring extra help and Social Security and wages and all that stuff. So what are some ways that people can easily get into outsourcing to help build their business and upscale?
There's a great doctor of, I forget if he was a psychologist or psychiatrist, but the name was Dr. Leo Marvin, and his advice was always that of baby steps. And if you haven't yet picked it up, I'm talking about the Bill Murray movie, What About Bob? And that really becomes the formula into it. The challenge is I meet so many people, and I just give the sort of, roadmap of my business nowadays. I have a full-time web and graphic person. She does my website. She does any graphic stuff that you see of mine that actually looks decent. She does that. I've got somebody who is more of a, as needed basis that I do a lot of email marketing and email communication. And my job is to design things in a very bare bones format. I do my best editing in like the text edit, the bare bones notepad of a computer where you can't change the fonts, you can't change the layout, because then I just have to focus on the message. Then I send that off to him, and then he makes it fit into the templates for my email marketing system. I've got people who I have a podcast that goes out every Thursday. We just, I think, are about to release episode number 203 after about 5 years of doing it. And I record it, and then that goes off to a team of editors, and they fix the audios. They put it all together. They write the first draft of the show notes, and they hate that I say it. They write the first draft of the show notes, but I always edit it. So thank you, writers. It's a first draft. And then I've got someone who does video. Now, not all these people are full-time. Only one of them is technically full-time. And recognize, though, I am somebody who's running a media business. There's a lot of stuff going on beyond just seeing one-to-one clients. There's ongoing educational resources that are a whole massive passive income part of my life, which that's what funds the need for those other things. So recognize, first of all, you don't need probably the number of people that I've got. And instead, look at it from, well, first of all, the amusement on this is I meet a lot of people who will drop thousands of dollars to go to a convention, but won't give someone $40 to make their business card look decent. I'm laughing because we're watching the TV show on Amazon, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And there's a subplot of the show that her manager bought a typewriter and makes the business cards one by one. And it's a bit of a parody that, of course, and the show takes place in the 1950s. It's a bit of a parody of the, oh, you have a couple of those? No, I've only got 6. But I meet people who, their stuff is, it doesn't look good because they've self-produced it. Recognize and embrace what your skills are and outsource the rest to somebody else who can do it even better. The easiest point into this is to realize that if you expect they're going to build everything you want on the first pass, they're an outsourcer, they're a designer, they're not a freaking psychic. So you have to kind of ease into the relationship. This is where I will hire people who, You go to the websites like Upwork or even outsourcely.com is a cool one if you're looking for someone who's more full-time. Actually, I just had a funny experience with Outsourcely that someone who I know, I actually recommended, go to Outsourcely and, search for that service. And she goes, the most qualified candidate I found, actually, then I suddenly looked at their resume and she mentioned she worked with you. Like, oh yeah, Karen? She goes, yeah. It's like, hire her. She's amazing. Meanwhile, my gears are turning. It's like, I need to hire Karen again. So look at it from the perspective of what are the simplest elements of this project. So to connect with the web designer who I now use, it turned into, she clearly, based on her resume, based on her work portfolio, she could do websites. But we started with a logo. Redesign this logo for me. Once I saw she was skilled with the logo, then it became, you know what? I'm not quite happy with my website as it is right now. Could you do like a new sketch of what you think the layout would better be for this website? And she designed that. Baby steps. Then from there, she made the actual navigation bar of the website actually effective. It actually worked now, which then from there, we built out the entire homepage. Then from there, we pivoted into an ongoing relationship. She's been working with me now for 3 years. So start with the smallest task. The same as I didn't walk up to this girl at my college in 2003 and say, you and I are going to have kids. Instead, I eventually asked her out. We eventually started dating. We eventually moved in together. We eventually got the cat. We eventually got engaged. Then we had, then got married. Then we moved. Then we had another child. There's a relationship process to this, which the benefit becomes, here are people I've hired over the years online that just didn't fit for what I was looking for. And the number one rule of outsourcing, I'd say, is don't be a jerk. I pay, I pay when it's not going well to politely exit the contract. I've got, this is not yet fully public because I haven't yet announced it, but I'm going to be launching a second podcast sometime, I believe middle of March, if not first thing in April. And right now I'm working with people to do the new voice introductions and the music framework to kind of build the skeleton structure of it. And here's someone I hired to do the voiceover, and based on the audio that was there in her portfolio, was a great fit. But even after several notes, it wasn't exactly the right voice for the project. And instead, I just paid the full service fee. It was $50. Thank you for your time. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a match, but here. And got a really nice response back. So again, start with those littlest of steps in the process, to say, make this better, make this pretty, make me one like this, and then expand the relationship out from there.
Now in NLP, that reminds me of chunking down. And recently I had a conversation with someone about, there's this feeling, and just looking at you, it's like, oh my God, you put out so much stuff. It's amazing. I mean, it's incredible. Like the Dave Ellman Institute helped write their training manual, I believe. Your name's on the book.
Yeah.
But when things seem too big and too overwhelming, to be able to chunk it down into its smallest component and then look at that and how does that feel? How does that look? How does that sound? And if that's too much, chunk it down until it's a step that is so small that you're guaranteed success with it.
Right.
As, you're talking about outsourcing, to be able to give them something that a softball that they can hit out of the park, guaranteed.
Which even to look at rituals, let's take the example of the podcast that I do, the Work Smart Hypnosis podcast. It's, again, more than 200 episodes at this point, more than 350,000 downloads around the world. And I typically record it once or twice a month. What happens is I'll just schedule all the recordings that I'm going to do for that month in one swipe, just knock them all out in one pass, and then we're done. The exception is sometime in the next 2 days, we have to re-record the one that's supposed to go out next week because the internet connection apparently wasn't that good, that's part of it. That's the whole deal with what emerges of all things technology. So these things will often happen. But again, going back to the actual core of it, it didn't happen unless I actually scheduled it.
So what I'm excited to, now we get to talk about the book. Tell me about your latest book. And also, is this your first book? And also the book is Work Smart Business, Lessons Learned from Hypnotizing 250,000 People and Building a $1 million Brand. Tell me about that and more.
Yeah, I'd say first official book. I've done like ebooks and I've done smaller release things. In terms of wide release, going global with it, this is officially the first in that context. The whole sort of mission statement behind it is that I kind of pulled back at one point and looked at the shape of my business and realized, here's all the stuff that I've done. And let's call it out. In the hypnotic profession, we often have to begin our work by clarifying, I'm not going to make you bark like a dog or cluck like a chicken, dispelling myths and misconceptions. And yet, in spite of that, building multiple six-figure businesses inside of one rather quirky little industry. And it's where I started teaching hypnotists many years ago and other related wellness practitioners how to run their business. I used to have a program called Hypnosis Business Bootcamp, and then I had to retitle it Hypnotic Business Systems because acupuncturists wanted to be inside of it, life coaches wanted to be inside of it, and chiropractors wanted to be inside of it. So it became, let's change the name to welcome more people in. And over the years, my potential clients would, of course, look me up before they'd come in to work with me, and they'd see everything else that I was doing. And it become a nice mix of, yes, they were coming in for personal change by way of hypnosis. Here was the chiropractor coming in for issues with public speaking, because that's how she was trying to drive traffic to her business. And yet realizing it wasn't just a fear of public speaking issue, it was also the strategy of what she was doing in her presentations. So we began to work in a bit of a hybrid approach in terms of not just the overcoming the fears and boosting the confidence, but also getting into the actual strategy. So really listening to my audience and recognizing there was a greater need to just simply think differently about how we approach our business, and unpacking what were those principles, what were those strategies that made that happen. And it's where it's been an awesome experience the last couple of weeks with the book coming out, of people who I've never met reaching out. Hey, I'm in insurance, and this is the message I needed to hear. This is helping me to grow. Hey, I manage a team of people who are in a completely different industry than I am. And could you come speak to our group about, what we can do in terms of individual mindset to all become leaders within our success, to think like entrepreneurs, even though we're employees inside of this business. So the whole mission statement was that I meet too many people who feel they are victims of their own circumstances. And instead, here's what you do with that situation. Here's how you think differently about how everything in business comes down to relationships. How do you think logically about how to advance that relationship moving forward? And of course, bringing in some of the hypnotic language patterns, because if you've got a few secret weapons to become more influential, you feel a lot more confident and a lot more effective getting into that business relationship.
I love technology, and I see that as a theme through a lot of what you do using it. And there was something that really hit with me in your book, a quote that you said, "I only remove myself from business if technology improves the customer experience." And
Yeah.
I just love that distinction, because my biggest pet peeve, my challenge with technology is like, the intention behind it is that it's to make things easier or better. And sometimes I think we get hung up in, well, I'm just, doing technology, but it's taking longer, or it's a not as good experience. So any comments on that? Or
Yeah, and it's the formula, you're right, of my principle is I'm only going to automate something if it's going to make the user experience even better. And it's a simple example that for a number of different services that I provide in my business, specifically around personal change, here's the phone call that comes in, and they're calling about stop smoking. And I get to say, have you watched the video on my website? Oh, no, not yet. I'm going to get around to that. Well, I tell you what, let's do this, because I made that video because it answers probably every question you've got, plus ones you haven't even yet thought to ask. Let me do this. Let me send you that video real quick. I'll call you back in about a half an hour. It's only about 8 or 9 minutes. Oh, okay. And I don't even have to call the person back because they've already watched the video. They've already signed up for the program. They've paid for it. They've scheduled, and we're all done. Why? Because I use that video to, I'm flashing to, this is a deep reference, Mad Magazine, Snappy Answers to Stupid Questions. Oh, I think you and I just became best friends on this one. And not that those are stupid questions, but again, people ask the typical things. What are your hours? Where are you located? How does this work? And to start to compartmentalize those things in such a way that now a sequence of videos answers those things for me, which does so in a way that, I feel that this is perhaps a lesson that came from the working with actors. I came to appreciate the actor who could just turn it on versus the one who was backstage having to psych herself up and having to warm. There's an actress who actually emailed me a couple of years ago, and I won't say the name because it's a personal story, but if you've watched like Orange is the New Black or Louis, when that show was on before that thing exploded, you'd go, oh, her. And she sent me this random email. This is back in the theater career. And she goes, "You broke me as an actress and you made me a more effective actress as a result of that." Like, what did I do? She goes, "It was so cool. I looked you up. You popped up on LinkedIn and I see all this work you're doing in hypnosis." She's backstage completely freaking out that people are trying to talk to her. I'm in character. You can't interrupt me. This is like dating back to 2003, 2004. You can't interrupt me. It completely takes me out of character. I'm just waiting for the right moment to say, "So Ophelia in the 1500s had a BlackBerry?" And you see the gears turning and she's going, "Oh yeah, I'm being a little much." And she goes, "From that moment, I could just turn it on." So what I'm getting at is that, yes, I feel because of that environment, because of the state management from NLP, I can, quote, turn it on, at a moment's notice, but we still have those days where we're at 100%. Maybe those days we're only about 90%. The video is capturing the absolute best information. Or here's the sequence where booking a new client. Great. Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to receive an email confirmation. It's going to confirm where I'm located, where to park, how to find me, a copy of the office forms. You'll see how to confirm the appointments online. You'll also get a reminder of that if you don't click the button right away. Sound good? Which is just done. The personal hero, Ron Popeil, Showtime Rotisserie Grill, set it and forget it. Which the benefit now is that's a thing I don't have to repeat over and over. And it delivers it at 100% quality in such a way that now I can use that time on other parts of my business. And they're getting a much better experience by going through it in an automated format.
Nice. So what's next for you? You've got so much stuff going on. What are your trainings, your presentations, classes? You say you've got an NLP thing going on right now?
Yeah, that's going on right now. I haven't scheduled any local Northern Virginia events at the moment because I'm in the process of actually moving my office to get a bigger classroom after 7 years in the same space. For the hypnosis training side of things, actually, if you just head over to worksmarthypnosis.com, in the top right corner, there's a trainings tab. That's where you can find all the upcoming events that are going on there. Which I would just kind of point over to that for that purpose. I will be at the HypnoThoughts convention with that one doing a pre-convention offering with Richard Nongard. We're doing a 2-day event called Clean Up the Past. This is something that even though we're good friends, we kind of spar on how do you deal with past issues. So we're doing a 2-day event together on that one. And actually post-convention at that one, I'm teaching neurolinguistic business, which is about how do you take all these principles in NLP and apply that to the writing and to the presentation, the sales strategy in business. To really punch up those strategies, which again, everything's over at worksmarthypnosis.com. That whole WorkSmart branding kind of stuck. So the book is Work Smart Business. And as a nice little bonus for your audience, there's something I'm giving away. It's the Positive Influence Power Pack, which if you head to worksmartbusiness.com, that's where you can grab that for free. It's 2 methods of influence, one you use for yourself and one you can ethically use with others. Please use your powers for good.
What are other ways to get a hold of you? Like if somebody wants, private consultation or...
Yeah, the best bet for that is to go to jasonlinett.com, which you can spell it 7 or 8 ways incorrectly, and it will redirect to the appropriate spelling. But I will spell the last name because it's easy if you remember. There's only 6 letters, Linett. So jasonlinett.com. And I'm also on every social media platform as Jason Linett.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. And I will include all the links that you mentioned today and how to get a hold of you and also your book. Is it on Amazon, I believe, or what's the...
Yeah, it's on Amazon, paperback, Kindle version as well. And also inside the book, there's a nice little bonus that you get a free audiobook download of it too, which makes the reading and the integration of it a whole lot easier.
Well, I love the work that you do. And every time I listen to you, I always get something that helps me become more successful with my business. And as I said, I think it was on Facebook, it's like you make it rain every time.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime in the future.
All right. More fun later.
Thank you for joining us today with Awaken the Mind, hosted by David Juhas.
Awaken the mind, you need to understand. If you can't, you must, and if you must, you can. Now that I got you, let me put you in a trance. Got you feeling hypnotic, your mind, let me massage it. Your thoughts are getting quiet, your stress subsiding. You starting to see images, but it ain't no mirages. Think it's time to calibrate.
Calibrate.
Take a breath and concentrate.
Concentrate.
Get in into your subconscious. Time to feel the energy, the brain waves. Let's go deep into your memory. Beware of self, let the worries melt. All you see is you and you don't see no one else. Auditory digital, talking to yourself. It might seem bizarre, a feeling you never felt. This is your time to shine. Awaken the mind, the NLP and hypnosis guide. Yeah.